Hello and welcome to Unqualified Advice, an entertaining show for entertainment purposes. Join us as we talk about running our businesses, what we've been learning, and how we're applying lessons from academia and real life as entrepreneurs and investors. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Topics discussed represent opinions represented by parties with different circumstances than your own and should not be taken as advice. Any discussion of securities or other investments should not be relied upon as investment advice. Consult your personal financial advisor and perform your own due diligence. Podcast hosts, guests, and clients of Fig Social Capital may own positions in securities discussed in this podcast. Hey, Sean. Welcome to the Olympics.
Hey, Dan. Welcome to the Olympics.
Did you watch anything yet? Are you an Olympics guy?
I would not say I'm an Olympics guy, but we were clicking through to see if there was anything that we wanted to look at this morning. And I did. It's funny you start open with that because I wanted to share this with you, and this is the perfect segue to it. I have a question about the translation here. What sport is that?
So pool has nothing to do with the sport, right? It's just the men's pool.
Yes.
Of teams. Okay.
Teams.
Took me a second. So I guess volleyball.
Yeah, volleyball. Okay. I think the iconography for NBC's Peacock app. The guy was having a little bit of fun, if you ask me, on the volleyball. It's actually beach volleyball. I did click in to see what it was up. But no, we clicked through a few things. I haven't really watched anything yet. How about yourself?
It's the only time I get excited about things like handball.
Yeah.
Or just other esoteric things that you don't normally get to see, and then you get to see these top performers from around the world come together. It's cool. We watched some diving. We watched some handball. There's some other replays I already want to watch.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I have to say, in this digital age, it's much easier to see many of the things that you would want to see. I remember growing up, it was what was on one or two channels maybe, and you were, and
that was
what you got. Yeah.
Some people, I remember people complaining like, oh, I've got to wake up at 3 a.m. today to watch the whatever match, right? I'm like, that's dedication, but
yeah,
that was your choice.
Get a VCR. Get a VCR, wake up at 6 and pop it in.
But that's illegal.
Not only if you redistribute it. Yeah. Only if you're doing it for commerce. If you're just
Black
doing it personal use is all legit, I believe. Although I'm not super clear, I guess, on what the FBI warning content is at the beginning of old VHSs. Do they still do that on?
No, I'm thankful I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah. I
think there was some bootleg something or other uploaded to YouTube, and I was like, I'll watch this for a few minutes. And it opened with that little FBI warning, and I had forgotten about it.
The context around that is perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of movies,
think the YouTube algorithm would have picked it up or something and been like, I don't know about this one.
So speaking of movies, this is a topic my wife and I have been talking about recently because we went to the movies for the first time in I don't know how long last week. We went down to the AMC Theater.
What'd you see?
We saw Long Legs, starring Nicolas Cage as the serial killer.
I've heard this. It was good, yeah.
First two acts, very good. Got some third act issues, but it was fun. I'm glad we went out to the theater. We had a good time. It was a lot of fun. We went to the AMC here downtown Houston. Nice little theater, easy for us to get to. And, upon getting there, I was at first surprised by a couple of things. One, the length of the opening from when the playtime started to actually when the movie started has grown to about 25 to 30 minutes of previews, and at AMC, a number of AMC ads, one which was kind of on a little too on the nose about towards the investors and trying to get them to buy options and things of that nature. That I got a chuckle out of my Jamie looked at me and just didn't get it, but it made me laugh. No, we picked the AMC downtown for a reason that the last time we went to a theater, one we used to prefer, they switched to Pepsi. And we just realized that when we go to the movies, we like to have a soda. And who likes Pepsi? Who out there is intentionally buying Pepsi? And is that part is there a marketing strategy behind what sodas you would select for a movie chain? Because it literally deterred us from going to a different chain because of that. I wonder if that's thought about at a corporate level when they're surely signing these large contracts with Pepsi or whoever their sugar provider is, so to speak, for all their chains. I wonder how much market research goes into that, and if like how that plays into what theater chains may or may not be doing well at a time. I don't know. It was just a weird thought.
What percentage of people would actually like? I mean, I think you're in an elite club here.
No, yeah, I think
that would change.
No, it's
where they're going.
It's because we always get a cherry Coke with our popcorn, and just
cherry Pepsi. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't taste the same. We tried it, and it's just like we don't like this. I mean, it's the only time we ever get a full flavored soda is at the movie theater. I feel like. So it's a treat, and it's part of that experience. So it really deterred us from going to Regal Cinemas.
Interesting. We went up to one of the mountain towns a couple of weekends ago, and the whole town has been bought out by. It's not bought out by Pepsi, but like that. Pepsi is the only drinks provider that serves like all the official something or other. They must have done something contractually with like Epic Pass or. Is my guess, but yeah, it didn't really click. I'm not really a soda buyer, but like when I went in there, that was the only thing available. And then when we sat down at these little outdoor picnic tables or like octagonal picnic tables, they're made out of plastic, and there's like a little plaque on there saying that Pepsi provided these, and they're all made from old Pepsi bottles. That's kind of cool.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything against people like Pepsi. It's just a personal choice. It was interesting for me to think about, though, how that might actually impact like weird dynamics of theater changes, like trends and like moviegoers. Because I mean, I don't know. Moviegoers are probably across a giant spectrum, so it's probably not impactful at all. Just a thought that I had.
Who's buying Pepsi?
Yeah, who's buying Pepsi? Who actually intentionally?
Who's getting number 2?
Yeah, exactly.
Although I think Dr. Pepper's number 1 now.
I think you're right.
I saw something that said that.
I think you're absolutely right. So, what have you been reading anything lately, Dan?
Nothing additional to what we talked about last time. I think I finished the Tiger book. That was really good. It was really fun. Just a cool, expansive look at the history of a particular part of the world that, like, I don't know, no one thinks about, no one knows anything about. It's like just sort of a forgotten land and forgotten forest is how I feel about it. And then, tiger history and human tiger relations. And I don't know, it was all very, very cool. What else? And then I just started a book called Trust. And I'm not going to be able to tell you the name of the author, Diaz or something.
Okay.
It's set in New York, maybe 1920s. I mean, I've read chapter 1. So that's how much I know right now. It won the Pulitzer Prize, and
so set in the 1920s. So that would have been the time of Robert Barron's and the first land trust setting up, like Rockefeller setting up the first companies. That time frame.
Yeah, it centers around this kid/guy who again, like I haven't read enough of the book. Like maybe chapter 2, like focuses on a different character. I have no idea. Enough. But chapter 1 focused on a character who was like the son of a tobacco baron and was bequeathed tons of money. And he didn't smoke, wasn't interested in the family business, didn't fit in with any of the things that had to be done to make the family business go. Like dad was gregarious and charming and could swallow up any room that he walked into kind of thing. And meanwhile, the son is very sort of introverted, introspective, and I guess you go on to learn that he's a little bit brainy, and he starts looking at ticker tape, and then he starts trading, and then he just becomes this like hermit investor who's doing bond trading across the world. And I don't know, so far it's interesting.
Okay, I pulled it up here. It looks like let me know how it goes. If it's good, I might add that to the queue at some point.
Yeah, that's the before bed book right now.
Okay.
I think, and I finished Madeleine Albright's fascism book, which was really, really, really good. I'm glad I read it.
Okay.
But I don't know.
The one previously.
Yeah, the one comment I have on it is like I was reading or listening to Anne Applebaum. She like writes for The Atlantic, and she said something about like wanting to refuse to use the word fascism because it conjures up an image in people's minds that's too inaccurate, too triggered, too lots of things. And I think she's right. I have to agree with Anne in terms of if you're trying to transmit your message about something to a wide populace today,
yeah,
it's probably the wrong word, but Madeline's book focuses on the true meaning of the word and the history, really weaves together the history and many of the finer features of fascism. And I found the book totally engrossing.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm looking forward to checking that out someday. It's going to be a while before I get to it, but it is in my. I did add it to my queue after you mentioned it last time.
Yeah, I've been spending more time on running, so I've been swallowing up some books.
Mm-hmm. Well, good for you. Is it rodeo season out there? I'm just asking. I'm curious.
Yeah, so the family, without me, but the family went down to one of the towns down here who hosts the Douglas County Rodeo.
Okay.
And so my oldest held a 5-week-old goat and got some signed autographs from the rodeo queens. And my neighbors went down there this morning for breakfast, and they also had no idea the fair rodeo, whatever was going on. And so he texted me. He was like, "There's a parade down here."
Yeah, it's a big deal,
right? Sent me a picture, and it had the rodeo queen on horseback, trotting down the street. So that's cool.
That's
so yes,
very
it
cool.
is rodeo season.
I was curious. I was curious if I was going to see you show up in a cowboy hat at some point, knowing that out in California, 'tis the season. Not California, Colorado. I'm sorry. Summer is the season.
The greater West. It goes all the way to Hawaii.
That's so true. It really in Hawaii there's rodeo.
Yeah, my sister-in-law's a big rodeo girl.
What kind of? I guess so they have full livestock and everything that they tend on farms out there, pretty much. I suppose. I
totally.
Really hadn't thought of that being.
Me neither.
Because on Puerto Rico they import all of their beef. So, but Puerto Rico is a much smaller island, I believe.
Yeah. No, on the Big Island, there's big ranches, grazing cattle. It's like the West. Yeah. Parts of it.
Okay. Well, awesome. Good guess, I guess. I was just curious.
Yeah, just nailed it. I was like, where'd that one come from?
Well, no, it came to mind because I've had the song "Cowboy Dan" by Modest Mouse stuck in my head for the whole day for some reason.
Yes, I have been threatening to buy a cowboy hat.
Okay.
Not partly, mostly because the sun is so intense here. I was like, I need a full brimmed hat, and I kind of don't want to look like a 65-year-old retired guy who goes on walks in the sun. But I don't know what look I'm going for. But when I put on a big cowboy hat, I'm like, I think I could rock this. I don't know if it fits my personality, but if you don't know me,
it
might work.
Yeah, I think you got the long, lanky build of a cowboy. I think it works.
Yeah, I just got to get the jeans.
Yeah, I was gonna say you might need some Levi's or something.
Yeah, exactly. Red tabs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Wrangler built tough. I think Cowboys prefer Levi's. At least down in Texas, maybe up there it's different.
Who knows? There's a shop called Shepler's here that I could go to.
We have one called Cavender's. Yes. Picked up some bolo ties for a wedding I had to go to last year, where that was the request of the bride. So that's where I went. Can you
explain to us what a bolo tie is?
Yeah, it's a bolo tie is like the single thread, or not thread, but thin rope essentially, and then a little jewel or something, and then that comes down into two strings, and then little usually maybe the ends with a little silver tips on it or something.
Yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Well, I've been reading.
All right.
I've been reading a bit, getting into the original Fourth Turning, and I had a couple of thoughts here the other day that I wanted to run by you.
I want to hear them.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, we're currently in a situation that's only happened a couple of times before, where we have a person running for office that is running for a non-consecutive term. And I was thinking about the kind of times that's happened in the past, and I realized, I wonder which way this is going to go. Because the first time it was a Mr. Stephen Cleveland that was elected. That doesn't ring right. I understand why he goes by Grover Cleveland, because Stephen Cleveland, I'm not going to vote for that, but Grover, yes, please give me Grover on the ballot.
Yeah, Grover's going to represent the states.
And then the other time that I can think of recalling happening is obviously Teddy Roosevelt, right? So I'm trying to think, which one are we in more of a situation now, where what's the modern day more like? And I was trying to think of it through the lens of that book. I've not yet gotten through the point where I need to I think fully wrap my head around that. But so Grover Cleveland, I think, not too controversial. Second time around, it was I need to go do some digging on it. But TDR, I remember getting shot explicitly. So I'm thinking maybe Trump is a little more like the TDR version this time. The way history is repeating here. And obviously, the Bull Moose Party did not rise to power. It seems that things are moving more in that direction at this point in my mood today after a weird week. That I feel like we're more likely to end up with a Teddy situation. No commentary on Teddy Roosevelt. I think he was a pretty great president in many ways. Than a Grover Cleveland. I don't know. Any thoughts?
My thoughts are more like my questions are. Is this you're trying to map some of these events onto the cycles that are explained by the fourth turning, right? I mean, I'd have to go back and look. So Grover was 1880.
Oh, I had this all pulled up. I should have had this pulled up for this. Yeah, he was the 22nd and 24th president. He was president from 85 to 89 and then 89 to 97, having been born in 1837. Died at a ripe young 71. A spring chicken compared to our current options.
So Teddy was 15 years later.
Yeah, not long after. So it just seems that there was a period there, and I've been thinking a lot about our current day period in reference to Gilded Age or post, like coming out of the Gilded Age into that crisis, and it does it's kind of a weird mapping, but it kind of lines up. I don't know. I'm looking forward to someday doing a deep dive with some charts that I'm cooking up and pulling some stuff out of the book and kind of talking about it in depth, but just something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's totally worth thinking about and trying to map some of these things out, right? And then the other part of me is like, no, you're just going to play Nostradamus, right? Like, oh, that fits into the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, here's...
And then
like tease the data and you can get it to tell you anything, right?
Yeah. So yeah.
I don't know. It's not that any of it's true. It's just kind of interesting. I'm finding funny coincidences, I guess. And coincidence is not, doesn't indicate an actual cause or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and it's not a minor event. It's like such a, I don't know what the word is, but not minor event, but like with the stuff with the fourth turning, it's like, can you take that one split second and make it into something that is a trigger for such turnings? Or, you really have to like zoom out, look at the whole, realize what turn you're in, and then assume or like sort of say that there's some probability that something like this could happen.
How about this? How about this as far as an analog from now to that kind of that time? So think about a lot of what the book discusses in the fourth turning is the shadows of generations, casting shadows of generations, and a cycle where the children rebel from their parents, but then their children end up rebelling from themselves and become more like the grandparents. And so you end up with these psychological patterns and it's like almost like the Chinese zodiac is probably more accurate than the astrological zodiac for that reason, because it's on a 12-year cycle, right? So I mean that would kind of fall in line with a 20-24 year generation cycle in a weird way. But that, like, at that time, if we're in a going through a similar cycle, let's say, so what is having basically what would that be 16 years of presidents where you had a guy running, then you booted him out, brought him back. Then I guess then the guy that because Roosevelt replaced McKinley that got assassinated.
Just
then elected
lots
McKinley.
of assassinations.
Yeah, then that guy gets assassinated. Then Roosevelt decides not to run. I guess they would have voted for Roosevelt, though. It wasn't an indication of indecisiveness. I'm pretty sure Roosevelt would have won had he run re-election right away. It was that his indecisiveness ultimately bringing him down there. But that it's kind of an indication of indecisiveness in the electorate, right? And it's almost like, is that what we're seeing now, where we had Trump, then Biden, and then potentially have Trump again? It's like we're not really sure where we're going as a society when you see that. There's not a clear direction, and that's the similarity I find interesting.
I agree with the foggy direction, right? So watching, but I did not watch the whole thing or whatever. I watched bits and pieces and read some articles. But the Republican National Convention and the head of Teamsters spoke, I believe. I mean, what? They're like, that doesn't fit the model. right? The model that I've been alive for, my parents, basically. I mean, it doesn't fit the model. So like we're seeing sort of a reinvention and realignment of certain factions into the different parties. So when you have Trump do a bunch of tariffs and then Democrats get voted in to the executive and the tariffs basically don't change and then some of them get piled onto a little bit further, that's crazy, right? I don't know. There's just little bits and pieces where I'm like, it's foggy. Lots of people don't know. I mean, I think the electorate, to your point, the people don't know exactly where they stand. And factions have become more fractionalized. So it becomes less legible. And then the politicians who are playing to the populace don't know how to home in on their constituency quite as well as maybe they have in the past or
Yeah.
what we had gotten accustomed to.
Yeah, it's like a national consciousness cycle in a way of like, you know, what's in the zeitgeist, and things come and go and cycle in and out of popularity, and you know, whether it's a clothing trend or an actual idea itself of this is the norm, do seem to cycle in and out pretty
Well, like the idea of the economy being terrible right now, right? Like, didn't the Haktua girl sing some song to her grandma and she was like, Grandma, don't you know we're in a recession? And I'm like, that's so interesting because so many people believe this. And it's really, you know, if that kind of thing is finding me because I'm not out there looking for it, that's like, it's a real sign of how big that thought is when in fact our economy is doing. I mean, it's interesting.
I have some friends that work in industrial supply companies that are so think of MSC, Granger, Snap-on, those types of companies, right? Fastenal. Yeah. I know several that work for different ones because they've been trying to work with me for the last 7 years in my role making products. They know we need to buy stuff. Invariably the last 2-3 months that I've spoken with them, all of them are seeing a year down this year on year. They're saying they're down 20-30% from last year in their industrial supply sales, which is just gloves, banding belts, you know, Windex, things you just need to run a business. We're not talking raw materials here even. This is just, so if you're seeing a lag there, of course, companies do cut spending on some of those items. We're trying to tighten the belt. So that some of that happens, but that feels
Canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. It says something to me that there's some softness that is, I don't think necessarily showing up in the data yet. So I do think we're going to see a Fed cut because I think this is going to start showing up in the data. And maybe it is showing up in the data, and I just don't know what data to look at.
I think there's a lot of mixed signals out there.
Well, I guess which
one do you want to prioritize?
The ISM, like the whatever ISM stands for, Industrial Society Manufacturers Survey, that talks to, you know, they survey, you know, surveys are sketchy, but it's something anecdotal, if nothing else. You know, that data has shown, you know, some negativity in their demeanor. So I guess it's out there, and I think. I mean,
if I were to be surveyed, I'd be giving negative feedback.
I for sure would not be.
Not that the economy is bad.
No, it's just.
But I think it's moving in a direction that is flat to down sloping rather than up and up. You know,
exactly. It's not bad. It's just it's not ripping like it was, and maybe we're just cooling off to a slower pace, and that's okay. Like maybe it's
I think the Fed would like to have a cool burn.
Just a
right.
yeah.
I think that would be their ideal if they could.
So maybe we're getting there. I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. These are just early on anecdotal signals.
It's going to be a dance, right? Like I think some of the commercial loans and different aspects of floating rate debt, and I mean, there's a lot of that out there, and more of it's going to be coming due. A lot of that commercial real estate debt is on like 5-year fix, and I think it was 23 when some of that was going to really start. I'm not close enough to the subject to know, but like we have to be right in the sweet spot of seeing some hurt, and I have seen a few buildings where like these are big buildings, so like almost no one is personally getting hurt. Just big companies are getting hurt so far, but it's going to start hurting the, like, you know, perhaps the small business owner that took out a loan to buy the building that they operate out of. And, you know, it's a healthy small business. They don't have a ton of debt, but they own their property and it's on a 5-year commercial loan that's 30-year amortized. Like that could be a real wallop. I mean, these things, they're coming, I think. So we're going to see more hurt, especially if they don't cut or cut too little in relation to some of these things that are coming down. And then the other thing, like I was thinking, like, so as inflation is coming down, by leaving rates where they are, that's an effective hike.
Yes.
So we've been hiking like all the way to today.
Shit.
Yes, that's what I think. Because policy's getting tighter. If
Yeah.
inflation's coming down, it's all about real rates, right?
Yeah.
From a dispassionate mathematical point of view, it's about real rates. So if inflation is coming down and rates are staying the same, then that's effective tightening.
Yes, I think you're right, and I think there is some easing going on with treasury purchases in the back end.
But who does that help?
It's helping liquidity in lending markets,
so
and
keeps
and
the
money
system
markets.
going,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But the economy itself isn't really going to feel it. It keeps it from stopping, which would be
exactly. Makes it so banks have, because I think with the higher rates, banks had to have more reserves. And that those tools help fund those reserve funds, which go out at a 10x rate once you account for the way reserve capital actually moves through the banking system. It ends up at a 10x lending rate out in the real world. So I think that's more on that side, yeah. But just a point of counterpoint.
Have you been looking at conks?
Some days when I
have the brain cells too. It's really complicated, the stuff.
It is. I love Concodonomics flowcharts on the Treasury funding system, and it's just inner workings and it's amazing how many like banks, BNY Mellon, JP Morgan are intimately involved in like the way our government money is moved around the world, which I guess makes sense. They are the holder of the capital. Well, it makes sense,
and you want to push it out into, being market economy, you want it to be out there. Yeah.
Those are
you
the money
don't want it to be 100%
right?
centralized.
Like if you're supplying money, you want it to get the money into the money stores for the people to come in and buy, right? So I guess in a different way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, summary, we both feel like there's a bit of softening. We have some anecdata around softening of the economy generally. And then we've had effective tightening all the way up into today. So hopefully we cut in September.
So yeah, I think a cut in September. And I want to, we just posted recently our mid-year predictions episode. And I want to come back to something I said there where we were talking about after the hiking cycle, or after in a cutting cycle. We talked about the next year's being at kind of a 50-50 rate of being good or bad, whether it was going to go up or down. I said, well, that's a coin flip. Doesn't necessarily, is that meaningful? And I was thinking more about that. But when you think on average over the last 100, 120 years, 2 out of 3 years are good. It is a change in your odds, right? So you do see a change in expected value at this point, I would say, for next year versus. So if you're handicapping it, you should see a change in expected value of your investments next year. I would believe, in a way to think about it. Just to follow up a point on that.
Yeah, cool. What else do we have here? 2 degrees of Kevin.
2 degrees of Kevin naked. Yeah.
I didn't write down the keyword.
2 degrees of Kevin naked. We were talking about, my wife and I were discussing the other evening. There might have been a libation involved about growing up as a townie. And
well, hold on. What's a townie?
Exactly. So how do you define a townie? So because her sister still lives in the town where they grew up and she went to college, and Jamie moved away. We grew up in the same town and went to college in the same town. And so we would consider, Dan and I would consider ourselves to be in some way townies, the people that, were from town that were there.
Even if I didn't want to think of myself that way, I would get labeled that way. So whatever.
Exactly. So, and Jamie's point was, that she wasn't a townie because she always, wanted to leave. And I said, well, no, you're a townie until you leave. Because there's a lot of townies that say they want to leave that never leave. Yeah. So until you actually prove it, you're a townie is my take on that. But then we were talking about, the difference of how different college would have been if we had not been townies and were, maybe spending more time because she was working with somebody that had just been at Purdue for an event, or they'd graduated from Purdue, and Jamie was talking to them about the different places we visited when I've taken Jamie around Lafayette, West Lafayette. Sorry for everybody that has no idea what we're talking about. Local jokes get local work, I know. But anyway, this is the story. This teacher that Jamie was working with had come in, not a townie, spend a lot more time at like the campus locations where establishments around campus and hanging out at the things right, the restaurants and bars and coffee shops
Harry's.
right around the camp. Yeah. Harry specifically was mentioned, the cactus, the neon cactus.
The cactus.
Shout out.
Man.
And Jamie was telling her, this teacher, about all the places I'd taken her, which were all the townie places to go. And I realized that, man, you know, the dating pool was a lot smaller by making that decision to hang out where the townies hung out. And it really ended up becoming at the end like a game of, I call it 2 degrees of Kevin Naked, where you look around the table like that person's seen at least 3 of the other people at the table naked at one point in time. And so by definition, like we could be like 2 degrees from anybody at the table having seen somebody else naked was the concept.
That's terrible.
But it's true.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you break down, like, you know, I don't know, high school locker. You know, if you're townies and you're hanging out with other like high school locker room. I mean, it's just like your rule becomes truth really quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be other shenanigans.
Yeah, that's very true. And then anyway, that was it.
The rest of it isn't for recording.
Yeah, the rest of it isn't for recording. Well, actually, so I have one other idea that I wanted to talk about. I think we're to the point where let's start guessing about what the next generation is going to be named.
Yeah,
I think have we settled on Zoomers? Yeah, I think the next generation,
Zoomers, Gen Z, right?
Gen Z.
Like that's But like, how many? What's with the name Zoomers? Right? It was the Zoom generation, but like, were these kids zooming? They were zooming into school, maybe.
Not necessarily.
This is like such a blip in the entirety of the generation. Yeah.
Yeah. So Gen Z feels like it's going to stick more so, but we'll see. I don't know that it's even stuck, but I think the one that's coming after that, though, like we're
Gen Y, right? It's the millennials. It's just some sort of name. When did they start? Anyway, that's a whole different question.
Well, at one point. Well, yeah, there's a whole series of books written on that by many authors, I'm sure, about why generations are named or how they form. Actually, Fourth Turning goes into some of that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, we have Gen X, Gen Y, which is millennials, and then Gen Z, which got named the Zoomers so far.
Gen Alpha, I think, is going to be the native generation. In capital AITIV, it's going to be the first people that really, the way they're interacting with technology is possibly going to be quite a bit different than the way that any of us have used it so far to date have. It's like the people that, yeah, exactly. I think your kids are going to be in the native generation, and I'm calling it now. I think that's what we're going to name it.
I mean, from a branding perspective, I like it a lot. I'm scared of what that means to be as a parent, but I am also excited for my kids.
I mean, I've been playing with more tools in the workplace, and we're trying to integrate these tools that just seem to be rapidly developing more frequently in ways that are, I think, going to. We're not there yet. We're still kind of hacking around and trying to find the right fit for a lot of it. But once,
can you give me a use case, even if it's sort of anonymized?
Let me think here. Yes. So a good use case.
Because I'm interested to hear how other enterprises are using it, right?
For an example, a good example of a use case is in like our final inspection areas. A lot of time, we're doing a visual inspection of a product after it's been manufactured, and there's a lot of little things you have to check, and you might have to say, are all the O-rings in the right spot, or are all O-rings there? Are all the components facing the right direction? You can take pictures and train with about 30 photos of some good and some bad. Train a model in freaking Microsoft, like SharePoint, essentially, and it will be it will do visual inspection for you, and it was surprisingly accurate on the samples we've used it so far. It's not great for everything. It's good for certain things, but it's quickly getting there is what I see, and being able to develop these.
That's a really cool use case.
Yeah. And I thought, actually, my wife, Jamie, works for a company that they write content for education companies. They're education content company that writes content for school districts to use to teach their kids. And they're working with it in the sense of having in a interactive lesson, an AI chatbot there to kind of help walk them through the thought process, or here's a picture, and now let's talk about what's going on in the picture and why it's important, and using that chatbot as part of the learning tool. And I think, again, I don't think they have that. It's not, from what I've heard, definitely not perfect. It's kind of clunky, But I could see where that could be eventually develop as an actual tool that would be useful for helping certain types of, educational content be delivered. It's just another delivery mechanism.
These things, like, just makes me think back to like my days when I had a Windows smartphone, and a friend got the first iPhone, but it didn't even have 3G, and the internet wasn't ready for mobile-sized Safari browser. So many things weren't ready, or it didn't seem like this was, it felt a little bit like the future. But there was so much more work to do.
It's like, is this going to work?
If you're not an early adopter who's willing to sort of take the pain along the way, then you're like, well, I'm just going to put this on the shelf for a bit or not buy it, whatever. AI very much feels like we're right inside that zone right now.
I think so. I think we're going to see a
little bit of a lull. People who get it are knee deep. Yeah.
I think we're going to see a little bit of a lull in excitement over the next year as things start to develop not quite as quickly as people wanted to or expected to. To those people, I say we still don't have flying cars either, but bear with us.
Yeah, right. I just want teleportation. I just want it right now. Just boom,
the problem
Mozambique.
The problem with teleportation, at least according to David Deutsch, is that you're basically going to end up creating this problem of creating basically infinite versions of yourselves. So you can actually get basically a Rick and Morty situation going on.
Maybe I'm in for that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest risk with teleportation.
Doesn't the world need more than one of me? Okay, so I have a more serious question. Are bubbles required?
Yeah, right.
I'm starting to feel that way.
I think so because you have to get that explosive amount of capital put into the system for people to go and develop, and a lot of it's not going to work out. There's going to be a lot of failures, but a lot of the things that live through that bubble end up being, I think, really stable, long run.
Yeah. And to do it without the failures means there wasn't enough tries, which means you're not going to get the
also it's not going to
blast
happen.
Off outcomes.
Nothing works out as any of us plan. There's 0 people in the Forecasting Hall of Fame for a reason. We are terrible as planners, as a race, as a human race. We're just not good at it. Maybe AI will help us with that someday. Yeah, maybe. Which is problematic too. But so I think in a way bubbles. Just also why, like I have said in the past, that culling, there has to be a culling cycle of some of the bad ideas have to be.
You got to prune the tree to get the fruit.
Yeah, and then that capital gets freed up or stops being tied up and is redeployed into other, and not even just capital in terms of money, but the capital in terms of the time that the human capital, people working there, are then freed up to go work in other companies that are more or towards other missions, whether it could be, going to be a school teacher, the government, a government worker or something too. But there's then resources tied up in things that are just not going to work. So
this goes back, like the concept of, everyone needs to suffer in some way, right? Like, and it's the anti-fragility, right? We gain strength by going through the things that are hard. And if you're not doing hard things, then you're probably a more fragile being. But, on one of the darkest days of your lives, you might be at the table getting fired or let go or laid off or whatever it is. But if no guarantees, it may also turn up to be the best day of your life.
Yeah, well said.
It's really hard to put that in your brain in those moments, though. That's the key, is to stay. Don't let anyone else hack your disposition.
Don't let yourself ever become so crushed that you can't move forward. You feel bad. You're going to feel bad, but you got to keep moving.
Do the grieving.
Yeah. Go through the process, but keep moving, because this too shall pass.
I feel like that message might be early, but I do feel like that message is going to be one that could serve people in the next couple of years.
I think so.
Unfortunately, I think that might be.
And because we will eventually have a recession at some point. It's just a matter of it's going to happen. And things
how hard
will get,
it is. Yeah.
And we don't know what the trigger is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be, a forest fire somewhere causing a shortage of cocoa, causing a spike in who knows what. It's a butterfly effect thing that could happen. Or it could just be interest rates are too high for too long.
Yeah. Or you could just be someone who predicts a recession for the next 10 years and gets on CNBC every other week and says, like, the recession's coming. And you're super famous because you're just like this person who can be counted on to be pulled onto air, and you have a message.
Yeah, and then once it comes, like, we're gonna have a great.
And then
growth
he'll be
cycle
right.
too. And then he'll be right. And then they'll all be talking
And then
about how he was
celebrated.
right that 1 year and celebrated.
Yeah.
And then they'll keep having him on until it happens again.
Yeah.
It's the same cycle. But yeah. Anyway, let's stop thinking about recessions.
Yeah. Well, I
it's
guess
not
this is
fruitful.
another hard event in the current events book. But have you hugged your IT guy at work, Sean? Because I feel like pretty much every IT guy around the world had pretty much the worst week.
Yeah, I did not. I should have. Actually,
I mean, if you're not deploying CrowdStrike, then you guys were fine. But
we didn't have CrowdStrike, so none of our systems seemed to really be impacted. I think we had some other issues with some Microsoft email stuff and some other things going on. I don't know if it was related to CrowdStrike. There were some other Microsoft issues.
Microsoft
lingering.
had an issue that was independent of CrowdStrike. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally had to be on. So let me see if I can find the image. Actually, I couldn't get into my email the other, I don't know, Tuesday or something. Which, kind of a bummer because so I couldn't get in my email. I had to spend a good 20, 30 minutes on the phone with IT. My favorite part of interacting with IT though was I told them that I entered a ticket into the website to do so. Said can't get in my email, and they then promptly put a message on the screen that said you will be emailed with a message on how to resolve the issue.
Yeah. So you're saying just stare at my phone.
Yeah. It's like you don't get it.
Yeah.
No. Did you have any impacts on anything in your world?
No, but I just it is an issue that would be, I would have had an interesting weekend if I was still doing that stuff.
Yeah. Do you have any old coworkers that you know of that told you any interesting tales?
I didn't hear. You know what? I was like a lone IT guy mostly. I have a couple IT friends, but mostly they're all different job functions. So I don't have like a strong bench on the IT. Anyway, no, lucky to say that I don't know anyone that was impacted, and I wasn't impacted personally. But I do know that if you have, there are IT departments that have hundreds of thousands of computers deployed across the world. And if you have to gain physical access with encryption keys to the disk of each individual computer in order to work around the issue, which is what you have to do in order to recover from what CrowdStrike did, then it's bad. That's a lot of labor.
That's a lot of man.
Because most IT departments these days do as much remotely as possible because that's fast and cheap and it makes people happy. But yeah, I bet there's a bunch of dead computers, and I bet 2 years from now you're going to walk through some airport and there's still going to be some sort of display that you see that is like a blue screen of death. And also, like the other, like I feel like in the popular imagination, Microsoft might be getting more heat for this because it is Microsoft's blue screen of death, but Microsoft had nothing to do with.
Which is unfortunate for Microsoft. Honestly, I was thinking like I'm going to buy Microsoft on this news. Yeah. No, but not outside the point. Not advice. Yeah, it's definitely not. I thought at first everybody was talking about Microsoft. That was my first reaction was, oh shit, what did Microsoft screw up? But no, CrowdStrike. Do you have an understanding at all that you can kind of explain what exactly occurred? I've read a little bit, but I do not have an in-depth enough knowledge or have not dug.
So other operating systems do not let this level of access to the kernel. The kernel is like the most basic level of the operating system that communicates directly with the machinery.
KERNEL kernel, not COLONEL.
Yes, not II or kernel. And so if you have anything crash at the kernel level, the whole computer goes down. Everything that I interact with on a daily basis operates in user space. And so if it crashes, it just crashes the program. The operating system keeps going. What is the esoteric thing about Microsoft Windows? This is a bed that they made, right? By having an operating system that was extremely popular and extremely well targeted by hackers and other nefarious program makers, that malware and viruses became a huge problem, right? This wasn't a problem for Macs because they had like 3% market share back then. But for Windows, it was a huge problem. And in order to start addressing it, you had Symantec, McAfee, other household names create software to help combat this, right? Okay. Those programs had to operate at kernel access in order to try to stop these things from execute.
attacking that
You have
level.
a broader view of what's actually happening above you at different abstraction layers, like user space. So then eventually Microsoft gets smart, right? They want to start playing the Linux, Unix, Mac OS game of, completely locking down kernel level access. Then Symantec and whoever else, I'm sure others, piled onto EU competition courts and said, this is unfair. Microsoft already has been identified as this evil monopoly in the United States, and now they're trying to destroy our business by removing kernel access. EU agreed. By law in the EU, therefore worldwide, Microsoft had to continue giving kernel access to certain, I don't know if it's certain product makers or how that gets decided, I don't know.
Okay.
Which is to say that if this law by the EU didn't exist, this particular problem wouldn't have happened, I think. Yeah, this is legislation gone bad.
Ooh.
Let the technology evolve, right?
How much did CrowdStrike's market cap drop?
I don't know, plenty. So anyway, that is to say that still to this day, every great AV, antivirus, security software that goes into Windows, it goes in at kernel access. So then when CrowdStrike pushes an update, malformed, I don't know exactly what was wrong with the update.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that technical part of it. That update got pushed. It was bad in some way. It caused the system to crash, or the software to crash, but that software was running at kernel access, so the computer crashes. So then the computer is unable to boot, right? You push the on button and it goes to
again.
BSOD, right? So then in order to recover from it, you've got to boot Windows into safe mode, which is basically like the most basic level of operating system that can be made. None of the other software is running. It's just extremely bare bones. And then you go in there and get into the file system, which is likely encrypted these days. So then you got to put in an encryption key, which is going to be each machine kind of key. Then delete the bogus update file, shut the thing down, boot it back up, get CrowdStrike to run, make sure it pulls the new update, and now you've got your computer back.
My heart goes out to the folks in IT.
Yeah, that's what I kept thinking. I'm like, I'm really glad I'm not one of those guys right now.
My heart truly goes out to them. That
it would have.
like
it happened. Wasn't it like a Friday or Thursday? I mean, it just destroyed the weekend.
Yeah, Jamie had just landed from a work trip the day before. It's like, thank
Glad
God
she landed. There were a bunch of people. I mean, I know lots of other people just had travel plans completely wrecked too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Atlanta for days, weeks, a week. Yeah,
yeah. It's
Delta's ongoing.
and everybody's traveling, like in record numbers, so just the perfect time for it too.
Yes, yes,
ideal all the way around.
Yeah. And how many of those like IT workers were like on summer vacation or got called back? And they're like, I know you're in Italy, but you need to be on a plane tomorrow. And you're like, planes don't even run. Because physical access, man. Like,
yeah,
it's not like you can just hole up in your hotel room and the laptop. And
go ahead and FedEx
vacation.
me all those PCs. I'll stay here. You just FedEx the machines. It allows you quicker this way.
Yeah. Anyway, it was an interesting bit of history, like that little rub about the EU law. If I got close to accurate on that,
that's fascinating.
Just a really interesting little, and there's all kinds of examples like that. Like, you pass the law and then unintended consequence comes sprawling out later, even though, the people that are really close to the subject matter, let's say, could see it coming, but that doesn't, quell the mob anger.
Speaking of quell the mobbing, I think we've beat our listeners over the head enough for this episode.
Were we too negative?
No, not at all. I'm just putting a button on it. We want to thank everybody again for tuning in once more for some unqualified advice. I think we definitely were unqualified for this week for sure. And I don't know if there's any advice, so we might not have lived up to all the name, but at least half of it. Be sure to reach out to us on Twitter I'm at SlowVSM, and Dan is over there at Daniel Hatkey. We thanks again for listening. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. Help drive our listener numbers. If you throw us a review, we wouldn't mind that either. We really appreciate everybody's time. Have a good week.
See y'all.